The great council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that had witnessed 10,000 years of peaceful deliberation. Inside, representatives from 43 species gathered in their designated sections, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some stood on legs, others floated in specialized tanks. But today they all shared one thing: fear. The Catharan delegation entered through the main portal, and a wave of shocked silence rippled through the chamber. Ambassador Velnora remembered when the Catharan had been a proud people, their feathered crests held high, their golden eyes bright with intelligence. The beings who shuffled forward now were broken. Their feathers were dull and torn. Their eyes held the hollow look of those who had seen too much death. The lead Catharan, Elder Maktor, approached the central speaking platform. His translator device crackled as he began to speak. His voice was weak, nothing like the strong tones he had used in debates just 2 cycles ago. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Maktor said, "I stand before you not as an ambassador, but as a survivor. My people are dying. 17 of our colony worlds have fallen. Our home world is under siege. We came here because we have nowhere else to go." Velnora watched as holographic images filled the center of the chamber. The first showed a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents. The next image made several council members recoil. The same world was now gray and lifeless, its surface stripped of all organic matter. The oceans were empty. The land was bare rock. "This is what the Vracht swarm does," Maktor continued. "They consume everything. Every plant, every animal, every living cell. They take the biomass and use it to make more of themselves. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They only hunger." More images appeared. Vast clouds of organic ships, each one a grotesque combination of technology and living tissue. Ground forces that looked like walking nightmares, all teeth and claws and armored carapaces. Bodies of Catharan defenders torn apart and partially consumed. "We tried to fight them," Maktor said, his voice breaking. "Our defense forces engaged them at Kelthera. We had superior technology, better ships, more advanced weapons, but they did not care about losses. For every ship we destroyed, 10 more came. They boarded our vessels. They tore through our crews with their claws. They adapted to our weapons within days. Now they are coming here, to the core worlds, and we cannot stop them." The chamber erupted in discussion. The Pelthy representative, a floating jellyfish-like being, pulsed with concern. "This is indeed troubling, but surely our combined fleets can establish a defensive perimeter. Can they?" Maktor challenged. "Tell me, Representative, when was the last time your species fought a war? A real war, not a border dispute or a trade disagreement." The Pelthy had no answer. Neither did anyone else. The Galactic Council had enjoyed peace for over 3,000 years. Their ships were designed for exploration and scientific research. Their weapons were intended for asteroid mining or removing space debris, not warfare. Their soldiers were really just security officers, trained to handle minor disputes and criminal activities. Velnora rose from her seat. As a member of the Sildari species, she had served on the council for 50 years. She had helped negotiate treaties and settle arguments. But she had never faced anything like this. "We need to act," she said. "The swarm will not stop with the Catharan. They will consume world after world until they reach our core systems. We must pool our resources and create a defensive force." "With what?" demanded the Torgathi representative, a being that resembled a large insect. "My people have not maintained a military in 1,000 years. We have cargo ships, passenger vessels, research platforms. We do not have warships. None of us do." The truth of those words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. They had evolved beyond violence. They had built a civilization based on cooperation and scientific advancement. They had eliminated war from their cultures. And now, faced with an enemy that understood only consumption and growth, they were helpless. "There might be one option," Velnora said quietly. The words felt dangerous in her mouth. "There is one species that still practices warfare. One group that has not evolved beyond violence." Every eye in the chamber turned to her. They knew what she was going to say. "The humans," she continued. "The Deathworlders." The reaction was immediate and loud. Half the chamber erupted in protest. The humans were dangerous, unstable. They came from a planet so hostile that it should have been impossible for intelligent life to develop. They were persistence predators, evolved from creatures that had hunted prey by chasing them until they died of exhaustion. They had only achieved space travel 200 years ago, and they had done it while still fighting wars among themselves. When humanity had first made contact with the Galactic Council 15 years ago, there had been hope, a new species to join the family of civilized worlds. But the assessment teams had been horrified by what they found. Humans still maintained standing armies. They still built weapons designed specifically to kill other intelligent beings. Their entertainment was filled with violence. Their history was an endless cycle of warfare and conflict. The Council had voted to quarantine Earth's system. Humanity was deemed too dangerous for integration into galactic society. Warning beacons were placed at the edge of their space and all contact was forbidden. "You cannot be serious," the Pelthy representative said. "The humans are barely civilized. They are violent and unpredictable." "Exactly," Velnora replied. "They are violent. They understand warfare. They have weapons designed for killing, not for mining asteroids. They have soldiers who train for combat, not security officers who handle disputes." Elder Maktor looked at her with his hollow eyes. "Will they help us?" "We were part of the council that voted to isolate them. We called them barbaric." "I do not know," Velnora admitted, "but they are our only chance." The debate raged for hours. Many council members refused to even consider asking the humans for help. Others argued that the humans might be just as dangerous as the swarm. A few pointed out that humanity might not even respond to a plea from those who had rejected them. Finally, as the station's artificial sun began to set through the massive windows, a vote was called. By a narrow margin, the council agreed to send a distress signal to Earth's system. Velnora watched as the communication technicians prepared the message. It was simple and direct. It explained the situation. It requested military assistance. It promised consideration for full council membership if humanity helped drive back the swarm. The message was loaded into a quantum transmitter, the fastest method of communication available. The technician looked at Velnora for final confirmation. She gave a small nod. The message launched into space, racing toward the small yellow star that held humanity's homeworld. It carried the hopes of billions of beings. It crossed the warning beacons that surrounded Earth's system, the beacons that declared humanity too dangerous for civilized space. In the council chamber, Elder Maktor stood at the window looking out at the stars. "Do you think they will come?" he asked quietly. Velnora joined him at the window. "I do not know, but if they do, I pray we are ready for what comes with them." Far away, beyond the core worlds and the civilized space, the Vracht swarm continued its endless consumption. They had detected the council station. They were already planning their next assault. Time was running out. In the darkness of space, the message raced toward Earth, toward the Deathworlders, toward humanity. The galaxy had called them too violent for peace. Now the galaxy desperately needed that violence to survive. The warning alarms cut through the quiet hum of Earth's orbital defense station like a knife. Admiral Sarah Chen looked up from her morning coffee as the priority alert flashed across every screen in the command center. Around her, officers rushed to their stations, fingers flying across holographic displays. "Admiral, we have an incoming quantum transmission," Lieutenant Morrison called out. "It is coming from beyond the quarantine boundary. The source signature matches Galactic Council encryption protocols." Chen set down her coffee and moved to the main display. "The Council? They have not contacted us in 15 years. Put it through." The message played on the central screen. Chen watched in silence as the Catharan elder explained the situation. "The Vracht swarm. 17 worlds consumed. Billions dead. A plea for military assistance." She saw the images of stripped planets and the horrific organic ships. When the message ended, the command center was completely silent. "Get me a connection to Earth Command," Chen said quietly, "and wake up the Security Council. They need to see this." Within an hour, Chen found herself in a virtual conference with the most powerful leaders on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and admirals filled the holographic space around her. The message from the Galactic Council played again. The reactions were mixed. "This is the same council that told us we were too violent," General Park from the Asian Defense Coalition said. "They put warning beacons around our system like we were a disease. Now they come begging for help? Billions of beings are dying," replied President Okonkwo of the African Union. "Does it matter what they said 15 years ago?" "It matters," argued Prime Minister Petrov. They judged us. They isolated us. They called us barbaric and dangerous. They said we were not evolved. Enough for their precious civilization. Chai had been there 15 years ago when the Galactic Council's assessment team had visited Earth. She remembered the way they had looked at humanity's military bases, the disgust in their eyes when they learned that humans still fought wars against each other. The horror when they realized that every nation on Earth maintained weapons capable of destroying cities. The chief assessor, a Pelthi named Korval, had made his report in front of the entire council. Humanity is a species of persistence predators, he had said. They evolved by chasing prey animals until those animals collapsed from exhaustion. This hunting instinct is still present in their culture. They glorify violence in their entertainment. They teach warfare to their young. They have weapons that serve no purpose except killing other intelligent beings. They are not ready for galactic society. Perhaps they never will be. The vote had not even been close. 40 species voted for quarantine. 3 voted for limited contact. None voted for full membership. Humanity had been alone ever since. Chen spoke up in the conference. They were wrong to judge us the way they did. But they were not wrong about what we are. We are violent. We do understand warfare. Our entire history is written in blood, and right now that is exactly what the galaxy needs. You want to help them? General Park asked. After everything? I want to help the innocent people being slaughtered, Chen replied. The Catheran did not ask for this. Neither did the other species in the path of this swarm. Yes, their leaders judged us, but their people do not deserve to die because of that. There is also a practical consideration, added Director Webb of Earth Intelligence. If this swarm consumes the core worlds, how long before it reaches us? We are isolated, yes, but we are not invisible. Eventually, they will find Earth. Better to fight them there than here. The debate continued for 3 more hours. Arguments were made on both sides. Some leaders saw an opportunity for revenge, a chance to watch the council suffer as they had made humanity suffer. Others saw a moral obligation to help those in need. Still others saw a strategic necessity to stop the threat before it reached human space. Finally, Secretary General Martinez called for a vote. The question was simple. Would humanity respond to the Galactic Council's plea for help? The vote was close, but the result was clear. Humanity would answer the call. Chen returned to the orbital defense station with her orders. She was to take the Third Fleet, humanity's most powerful naval formation, and render assistance to the Galactic Council. She had full authority to engage the Viract swarm and coordinate with Council forces. The Third Fleet consisted of 12 warships, each one a testament to humanity's violent history. The carrier Indomitable served as the flagship. 2 battleships, the Thermopylae and the Stalingrad, provided heavy firepower. 4 cruisers offered speed and flexibility. 5 destroyers rounded out the formation. Together, they carried enough firepower to level a continent. Chen walked through the Indomitable's hangar bay, watching as Marines loaded equipment and pilots performed pre-flight checks on their fighters. These men and women had trained their entire lives for warfare that the galaxy had forgotten. Now they would finally face the kind of combat they had prepared for. She found Captain Marcus Rivera overseeing the loading of his Marine company. Rivera was a veteran of the Resource Wars, the last major conflict on Earth 20 years ago. He was exactly the kind of soldier humanity needed for this mission. Captain, Chen said, "Are your people ready?" Rivera saluted. "Ready and eager, Admiral. Most of these Marines have never seen real combat. They are excited to finally put their training to use. This will not be like fighting other humans," Chen warned. "The swarm does not think like us. It does not fear death. It only consumes and grows. Then we will teach it to fear," Rivera replied with a grim smile. "That is what we do best." Chen nodded and moved on. She understood his confidence. Humanity had been preparing for war for its entire history. Every nation maintained military academies. Every soldier trained in tactics and strategy. Every engineer designed better weapons. Violence was woven into the human soul, a legacy of millions of years of evolution as predators. The Galactic Council had been right to fear humanity. They just had not realized that sometimes fear was what the galaxy needed. The fleet launched 3 days later. 12 warships accelerated away from Earth, their fusion drives burning bright in the darkness. They crossed the quarantine boundary, passing the warning beacons that had kept humanity isolated for 15 years. This time, humans were not staying home. Chen stood on the Indomitable's bridge watching the stars stretch into lines as the fleet engaged its faster-than-light drives. Around her, officers monitored sensors and coordinated with the other ships. Everyone knew the stakes. This was humanity's chance to prove itself to the galaxy. Navigation, set course for Catharan space, Chen ordered. Maximum speed. Communications, send a message to the Galactic Council. Yes, Admiral. What should the message say? Chen thought about the Elder Mactor's desperate plea. She thought about the billions of beings facing death. She thought about the council members who had called humanity barbaric and dangerous. She smiled slightly. Tell them this, hold on. The Deathworlders are coming. The message transmitted across space, racing ahead of the fleet. Behind it came 12 warships filled with soldiers who understood violence in ways the galaxy had forgotten. They brought weapons designed for killing, not mining. They brought tactics learned from 10,000 years of human warfare. They brought the fury of a species that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain through sheer stubborn aggression. The Galactic Council had called humanity too violent for civilized space. Now they would learn what that violence could do when properly directed. The Third Fleet jumped toward the war zone, and humanity's answer thundered through space like an approaching storm. The Third Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Shalvris system, and every sensor immediately screamed warnings. The orbital space around the Catharan colony world was thick with Vrocked bioships. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one a twisted fusion of living tissue and organic technology. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical display. The Vrocked vessels moved in chaotic swarms with no apparent formation or strategy. They simply converged on anything that moved. Several Catharan defense platforms were already destroyed, torn apart by boarding actions. 3 Catharan frigates tried to hold a defensive line near the planet, but they were being overwhelmed. Status of the colony, Chen asked. Surface scans show active combat zones across 4 continents, Lieutenant Morrison reported. Vrocked ground forces have breached the main population centers. Estimated civilian casualties are already in the millions and climbing. How many hostiles are we looking at? Approximately 800 bioships in orbital space. Composition varies from small fighter-class vessels to 3 large carrier organisms. Ground forces are harder to count, but thermal imaging suggests tens of thousands of individual swarm units. Chen felt the weight of the decision before her. 800 ships against her 12. The reasonable choice would be to retreat and request reinforcements. But those were Catharan civilians dying down there, and humanity had not come all this way to be reasonable. All ships, battle stations, Chen ordered. Target the carrier organisms first. Battleships Thermopylae and Stalingrad, you have primary targeting authority. Cruisers provide screening fire. Destroyers sweep the fighter-class vessels. Indomitable will remain on station and coordinate air support for ground operations. Admiral, we are heavily outnumbered, her executive officer warned. Yes, Chen agreed. But they have never fought humans before. Let us teach them why the Galactic Council was afraid of us. The Third Fleet moved forward in precise formation, and the Vrocked swarm reacted immediately. Bioships turned toward the new arrivals, their organic weapons charging with bioluminescent energy. The swarm had consumed 17 worlds. They had faced dozens of species. They had never lost. The battleship Thermopylae fired first. 3 electromagnetic railguns hurled tungsten penetrators at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds and struck the nearest carrier organism. The bioship was designed to absorb energy weapons and resist chemical explosives. It was not designed to handle kinetic impactors traveling at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rods punched through the carrier's organic armor like it was paper. They passed through vital organs and structural tissue, creating massive hydrostatic shockwaves. The carrier organism shuddered, its bioluminescent glow flickering. Then it exploded as its internal pressure systems failed catastrophically. The swarm had never seen weapons like this. Their bio-armor could adapt to energy frequencies and chemical compounds. But simple kinetic force delivered with overwhelming speed and mass gave them nothing to adapt to. The Stalingrad fired next, followed by the cruisers. Railgun rounds and missiles filled the space between the human fleet and the swarm. The missiles were not sophisticated seeking weapons. They were simple solid-fuel rockets with explosive warheads, technology that predated human spaceflight. But they were fast, numerous, and designed for one purpose: destroying enemy ships. The Viracht bioships tried to respond. They fired bioplasma bolts and launched swarms of smaller organisms that acted as living missiles. But the human point defense systems shredded the living projectiles with rapid-fire autocannons. The bioplasma dissipated against the fleet's electromagnetic shields. Within 10 minutes of engagement, the humans had destroyed over 100 swarm vessels. The second carrier organism exploded under concentrated fire from 3 cruisers. Fighter-class bioships died by the dozens as destroyer-class ships swept through them with missile barrages. The swarm did what it always did. It adapted. Bioships began evasive maneuvers, moving unpredictably. They concentrated their fire on single human vessels, trying to overwhelm shields through sheer volume. Several swarm ships attempted boarding actions, launching themselves at human hulls. "Boarding pods incoming," the tactical officer reported. "They are trying to breach our outer hull." "Let them try," Chen said calmly. "Security teams repel boarders. Show them what happens when you try to board a human warship." The Viracht boarding organisms attached themselves to the Indomitable's hull and began cutting through the outer armor with acidic secretions. They breached into a cargo bay and flooded inside, their claws ready to tear apart the soft beings they expected to find. Instead, they found human Marines waiting with automatic weapons. The Marines opened fire with rifles that used chemical propellants to accelerate metal projectiles. The Viracht had armor that could resist energy weapons, but high-velocity bullets tore through chitin and flesh with ease. The boarding action lasted 4 minutes. None of the Viracht organisms survived. Similar scenes played out across the other human ships. The swarm had boarded countless vessels from dozens of species. They had never encountered defenders who were this aggressive, this well-armed, or this experienced at killing. "Admiral, we have an opening," Morrison reported. "Path to low orbit is clear. All ships advance. Indomitable, launch ground support wings. Captain Rivera, your Marines are cleared for deployment." In the Indomitable's hangar bay, Captain Marcus Rivera stood with his company as they loaded into dropships. 200 Marines, armed and armored, ready to deploy into hell itself. Rivera had fought in urban combat on Earth. He had seen warfare at its ugliest. But this would be different. This was fighting an enemy that wanted to consume every living thing on the planet. "Listen up," Rivera called out over the company channel. "We are dropping into the capital city. Catharan defenders are trying to hold an evacuation point at the central spaceport. Civilian transports are loading refugees, but they are about to be overrun. Our job is to hold that spaceport until every civilian is evacuated. We hold the line. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. We are human Marines and we do not leave people behind. Am I clear?" "Sir, yes, sir," 200 voices shouted back. The dropships launched from the Indomitable's hangar, 12 armored craft falling toward the planet like meteors. Fighter cover flew above them, engaging swarm-flying organisms that tried to intercept. The fighters won every engagement, their missiles and cannons shredding the biological flyers. Rivera watched through the dropship's cameras as they descended through the atmosphere. The capital city had been beautiful once, all graceful towers and garden terraces. Now it was burning. Viracht forces swarmed through the streets, hunting down fleeing civilians. Catharan defenders fought desperately, but their weapons were designed for peacekeeping, not warfare. They were being slaughtered. The dropships landed at the spaceport in a storm of dust and debris. The ramps dropped and human Marines poured out, weapons ready. Rivera took in the situation at a glance. The spaceport was a large open area surrounded by administrative buildings. Civilian transports were loading refugees in the center. Catharan soldiers held a defensive perimeter around the transports, but that perimeter was collapsing under swarm attacks from 3 directions. First platoon, left flank. Second platoon, right flank. Third platoon, center with me. Fourth platoon, secure the transports, move. The Marines deployed with practiced efficiency. They had trained for urban combat their entire careers. This was just another operation, except the enemy was more alien than any human adversary. The Viracht surged forward, and the Marines opened fire. Automatic rifles chattered, each burst carefully controlled. Machine gunners set up positions and laid down suppressing fire. Grenadiers launched explosive rounds into swarm concentrations. The sound of human weapons was deafening, a continuous roar of chemical propellants and explosions. The Viracht had faced many species. None of them fought like this. The humans did not fall back when charged. They held their ground and fired with brutal efficiency. They coordinated their fire, concentrating on priority targets. They used cover effectively and supported each other with disciplined teamwork. A massive Varacht warrior organism, twice the size of a human, charged Rivera's position. It was covered in thick armor plates and armed with scythe-like claws. Rivera calmly raised his rifle and fired a 3-round burst into the creature's head. It dropped instantly. A Catharan soldier stared at him in shock. The Catharan had been firing energy weapons at similar organisms for minutes with little effect. The human had killed one with 3 shots. "What kind of weapons are those?" the Catharan asked. "Bullets," Rivera replied, reloading. "Simple metal projectiles accelerated by controlled explosions. Low-tech but very effective. You still use explosive propellants? That technology is thousands of years old." "Yes," Rivera said, firing again and dropping another swarm warrior. "It works." The battle raged for 2 hours. The Marines held their positions despite overwhelming numbers. They rotated fighters to reload, maintained clear fields of fire, and called in air support when concentrations of swarm forces threatened to break through. The war changed after Shalvaris. News of the human victory spread through the surviving Catharan colonies and beyond to other refugee species. For the first time since the swarm had appeared, someone had not just survived an attack but had won decisively. The Galactic Council watched the battle recordings with a mixture of hope and horror. Admiral Chen stood in the Indomitable's briefing room, surrounded by holographic displays showing 6 different star systems. Each one had a swarm presence. Each one had civilian populations trapped and desperate. The Third Fleet could not be everywhere at once, but they could strike hard and fast. "We need to change our strategy," Chen told her senior officers. "The swarm expects species to defend fixed positions and wait for attacks. We are going to do the opposite. We hit them when and where they do not expect it. We make them react to us." Over the next 4 weeks, the Third Fleet became a hammer striking across multiple systems. They would jump into a system, hit the swarm forces hard with concentrated firepower, evacuate civilians, then jump out before swarm reinforcements could arrive. It was aggressive, risky, and exactly the kind of warfare humans excelled at. In the Corveth system, 2 human destroyers ambushed a swarm supply convoy, destroying 12 bioships before the escorts could respond. In the Pela system, Marine raiders landed on a partially consumed world and rescued 3,000 survivors that the swarm had missed. In the Theron system, the battleship Thermopylae engaged a swarm carrier in single combat and reduced it to drifting organic debris in under 20 minutes. The Viracht swarm had consumed species after species using the same tactics, overwhelming numbers and relentless assault. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with such aggression and skill. They had never encountered weapons designed purely for efficient killing. They had never seen tactics that prioritized offense over defense. Captain Rivera found himself leading ground operations on world after world. Each battle was different, but the pattern was the same. Human Marines would deploy, establish defensive positions using actual military tactics, and hold against impossible odds while civilians evacuated. The Marines took casualties, but they always completed their missions. On the colony world of Shentar, Rivera's company held a refugee camp against a force 20 times their size. They used prepared fighting positions, overlapping fields of fire, and called in precision airstrikes. When a massive swarm warrior broke through the perimeter, a Marine corporal killed it with a shoulder-fired rocket launcher. The Catharan defenders who had been retreating in panic stopped and stared. Then they turned around and fought alongside the humans. "You teach them to fight like you do," noted Commander Thalrix, a Catharan officer who had been working with Rivera's forces. "Not just to hold ground, but to attack." "Defense is fine," Rivera replied, checking his rifle. "But you do not win wars by defending. You win by breaking the enemy's ability to fight back." Admiral Chen recognized that the war could not be won with just 12 ships and a few thousand Marines. They needed to turn the entire refugee population into fighters. She reached out to the Catharan leadership and the Galactic Council with a proposal. "Your species have been at peace for thousands of years," Chen said in a conference call with multiple council members. "You forgot how to wage war. We are going to teach you." The reaction was mixed. Some council members were grateful. Others were horrified at the idea of militarizing their populations. Ambassador Velnora, who had first suggested contacting humanity, spoke up. "What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? We share our weapons technology with you, not energy weapons or advanced systems." Those are too complex and take too long to manufacture. We give you chemical propellant firearms, explosive ordnance, and armor systems. Simple, effective, and easy to produce with basic industrial capacity. We also train your people in small unit tactics, defensive operations, and combined arms warfare. You want us to become like you? One council member said with clear distaste. Violent and barbaric. Chen's expression hardened. No, I want you to survive. The swarm does not care about your philosophical objections to violence. They will consume your worlds whether you fight back or not. At least this way, you have a chance. The debate continued for hours, but the reality was simple. 17 worlds had already fallen. Billions were dead. The human approach was working. Reluctantly, the council agreed. Production facilities across Catharan space began manufacturing human-designed weapons. Rifles that fired bullets instead of energy beams. Grenades that used chemical explosives instead of sophisticated electronics. Body armor made of simple ballistic plates. The technology was primitive by galactic standards, but it worked. Human officers spread across the surviving worlds, training local defenders in warfare. They taught basic infantry tactics, how to maintain weapons, how to establish firing positions, and most importantly, how to fight with aggression rather than passivity. The lessons were hard for many species to accept, but desperation is a powerful motivator. Captain Rivera spent 3 days on the world of Kelmora, training a company of Catharan volunteers. They struggled with the concept of advancing under fire. You are prey animals by evolution, Rivera told them bluntly. Your instinct when threatened is to flee. You need to override that instinct. When the enemy attacks, you do not run. You get behind cover and you shoot back. You make them pay for every meter of ground. You make them fear you. One young Catharan soldier, her feathers still showing juvenile markings, asked, "How do you overcome fear? How do you stand and fight when everything in your body tells you to run?" Rivera considered the question. Fear never goes away. I have been in dozens of battles and I am afraid every single time. The difference is that I act despite the fear. That is what courage is. Not the absence of fear, but acting anyway. You are not fighting for glory or conquest. You are fighting to protect your families, your homes, your species. That is worth being afraid for. By the 6th week of the war, the tide began to shift. Human forces, now supported by growing numbers of armed and trained local defenders, held system after system. The swarm still had numerical superiority, but they could no longer simply overwhelm opposition through sheer numbers. Back on Earth and in the Galactic Council chambers, political complications arose. Some council members complained about human tactics. A Pelthi representative submitted a formal complaint about the use of kinetic weapons, calling them needlessly destructive. A Torgathi diplomat expressed concern about the militarization of formerly peaceful species. Admiral Chen received a message from Earth Command forwarding these complaints. Her response was brief and pointed. We are winning. If the Council would prefer different methods, they are welcome to come fight themselves. Despite the complaints, the results spoke clearly. The swarm's advance had stopped. Several contested systems had been reclaimed. Refugee populations were being successfully evacuated. Human casualty rates remained high but acceptable. The war was far from over, but for the first time, victory seemed possible. Then the situation changed dramatically. The Third Fleet was engaged in the Helios system, providing cover for a major evacuation operation. When sensors detected something new, a massive swarm fleet was approaching, larger than anything humanity had encountered. Over 3,000 bioships, including 6 of the enormous carrier organisms. They are concentrating their forces, Lieutenant Morrison said, studying the tactical data. This is not a random attack. They are adapting to our tactics. Admiral Chen studied the approaching fleet with concern. The swarm was learning. They were evolving their strategy, just as they evolved their biology. This fleet was not here to consume a single world. It was here to destroy the human forces that had become such a problem. The Battle of Throne's Edge, as it would later be called, lasted 6 hours. The Third Fleet fought with everything they had, supported by Catharan vessels and orbital defense platforms. The humans inflicted massive casualties on the swarm, destroying hundreds of bioships, but the sheer numbers were overwhelming. The cruiser Valiant was swarmed by boarding organisms and lost with all hands. The destroyer Vigilant took critical damage and had to be abandoned. Human fighters died in their dozens, overwhelmed by swarm flyer organisms. By the time the swarm fleet withdrew, the third fleet had lost 2 ships and taken heavy damage to 3 others. Over 800 humans were dead. Chen stood on the Indomitable's bridge looking at the casualty reports. Around her, officers worked to coordinate damage control and search for survivors. The fleet had won technically, driving off the swarm attack and completing the evacuation, but it felt like a defeat. Admiral priority message from Earth Intelligence, Morrison reported. Chen pulled up the message and read it carefully. Then she read it again. Her expression shifted from tired grief to cold determination. Get me all fleet commanders, and contact the Ketheran leadership. Tell them we need every ship they can spare. What is it, Admiral? Morrison asked. Chen looked at the tactical display, seeing past the immediate battle to the larger war. Intelligence has located the swarm's breeding world, the source point where they create new organisms and coordinate their attacks. It is deep in uncharted space, heavily defended. You want to attack it? The combined fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the coordinates Earth Intelligence had provided, and every sensor went immediately to maximum alert. The breeding world hung in space before them, a massive planet wrapped in organic matter. It pulsed with bioluminescent light, and the very sight of it made Admiral Chen feel sick. The planet had once been a thriving world belonging to a species whose name was lost to history. Now it was transformed into a living factory. Vast organic structures covered the surface, kilometers tall, constantly producing new swarm organisms. The oceans were thick with biological material. The atmosphere glowed with chemical reactions from the breeding process. But it was the orbital defense that made even Chen pause. Thousands of bioships filled the space around the planet, not hundreds, thousands. Carrier organisms the size of cities, warrior ships by the hundreds, fighter craft that filled space like clouds of insects. This was the swarm's heart, and it was protected like nothing humanity had ever seen. Tactical analysis, Chen ordered, keeping her voice steady. Lieutenant Morrison worked the displays, his face pale. Estimated hostile count is over 5,000 vessels. Multiple planetary defense platforms. Significant ground forces. Admiral, our intelligence was good, but they did not mention the scale. We are looking at the entire swarm military capacity. Chen looked at the fleet under her command. 10 human warships including the damaged but operational Indomitable. 30 Ketheran vessels, armed now with human weapons but still primarily science ships at their core. 15 ships from various other Council species, crewed by beings who had never seen real warfare until humans taught them. 55 ships against 5,000. The reasonable choice was obvious. Retreat, regroup, request more forces. But Chen knew there would be no more forces. This was everything the Alliance could muster. And while they retreated and regrouped, the swarm would continue to grow, continue to consume, continue to kill. All ships. This is Admiral Chen. Her voice transmitted across every vessel in the fleet. You all know what we are facing. The odds are not good. Many of us will not survive this battle, but if we succeed, we end the swarm threat forever. No more consumed worlds. No more billions of dead. This ends today one way or another. All ships, battle formation Delta. We are going straight through them. The fleet moved forward and the swarm reacted. Bioships turned toward the intruders, their organic weapons charging. The first wave of swarm fighters launched from the carriers. Thousands of living missiles screaming toward the Allied fleet. All weapons free, Chen ordered. Make every shot count. The battleship Thermopylae opened fire, its railguns hurling tungsten death into the approaching swarm. Each round struck with the force of a small nuclear weapon, tearing through bioships and detonating in bursts of organic debris. The Stalingrad fired next, then the cruisers, then every ship that had weapons. The space between the two forces filled with fire and destruction. Human missiles carved through swarm formations. Ketheran energy weapons, less effective than kinetic weapons but still useful, added to the barrage. The Allied fleet's point defense systems worked overtime, shredding incoming biofighters, but there were just so many of them. For every swarm vessel destroyed, 3 more took its place. Bioships swarmed around the Allied fleet like sharks, firing bioplasma and launching boarding organisms. The Ketheran frigate Keltheron took critical damage and exploded, its crew lost in an instant. A Torgathi cruiser was overwhelmed by boarders and went silent. We need to break through to planetary orbit, Chen said, watching the tactical display. Navigation, Plot the shortest path through their formations. All ships close formation. We punch through together. The fleet tightened up, ships so close together that their shields overlapped. Then they accelerated, driving toward the planet like a spear thrust into flesh. Swarm vessels tried to block them, but the concentrated firepower of the Allied fleet carved a path through the opposition. A carrier organism moved to block their path, too massive to avoid. The Thermopylae did not slow down. It fired every weapon it had into the carrier's center mass while accelerating to ramming speed. The battleship struck the carrier like a meteor, tearing through organic tissue and bone. Both ships exploded in a fireball visible from the planet's surface. The Thermopylae's crew of 800 died instantly, but they cleared the path. The remaining Allied ships burst through into low orbit above the breeding world. Behind them, the swarm fleet turned to pursue, but now they were caught between the Allied ships and their own planet. They could not fire without risk of hitting the surface. Launch all ground forces, Chen ordered. This is it. Dropships and assault shuttles launched from every vessel that carried them, hundreds of small craft diving toward the planet's surface. The swarm tried to intercept them, but fighter cover and orbital bombardment cleared a path. Most of the drops made it through. Captain Marcus Rivera rode in the lead dropship, watching through the cameras as they descended toward the surface. Up close, the breeding world was even more horrifying. The organic structures pulsed with life, constantly producing new swarm organisms. He could see massive breeding chambers, each one capable of creating hundreds of warriors. The ground moved with swarm creatures more than he could count. Landing zone in 30 seconds, the pilot called out. It is going to be hot. The dropships hit the ground in a storm of weapons fire. Swarm ground forces converged on the landing zone from all directions. Thousands of creatures with claws and teeth and organic weapons. The dropship ramps fell and human marines poured out into hell. Rivera had fought on a dozen worlds during this war. Nothing compared to this. The swarm came in endless waves, so many that killing them seemed impossible. But the Marines held their ground, firing with brutal efficiency. Machine guns roared constantly. Grenades exploded in clusters of swarm warriors. Rocket launchers took down the larger organisms. Advance to the primary breeding structure, Rivera ordered. Second platoon suppressing fire. First and third move by bounds. Do not stop moving. The Marines fought their way forward meter by bloody meter. Catharan soldiers fought alongside them, using the tactics humans had taught them. One Catharan warrior, his feathers torn and bloodied, stood back to back with a human sergeant, both of them firing continuously at the approaching swarm. Rivera's company reached the base of a massive breeding structure, a tower of organic material that pulsed with life. Inside, he knew, thousands of new swarm organisms were being created. Intel had identified 12 such structures across the planet. Each one needed to be destroyed. Demolitions team set charges, Rivera ordered. Everyone else defensive perimeter. They are going to hit us hard. The demo team moved to work, placing human-designed nuclear devices at the base of the structure. The weapons were crude by galactic standards. Simple fission bombs that used the same principles humans had discovered centuries ago. The Galactic Council had thought nuclear weapons were barbaric relics. Now those barbaric relics were the best tool for destroying the breeding world. The swarm attacked in force, trying to stop the demolition. Warrior organisms the size of tanks charged the human lines. Flying creatures dove from above. Rivera emptied magazine after magazine, his rifle hot from continuous firing. A massive warrior broke through the line and charged him directly. He dropped his rifle, drew his sidearm, and put 3 rounds through the creature's head at point-blank range. Charges set. The demo team leader reported. Timer active. We have 10 minutes. All units fall back to the extraction point, Rivera ordered. Move now! The Marines retreated in good order, covering each other as they fell back to where the dropships waited. Similar scenes played out across the planet, as 11 other teams set charges on the remaining breeding structures. The swarm tried to stop them, but human aggression and tactics won out. In orbit, Admiral Chen watched her fleet slowly disintegrate under the swarm's counterattack. 3 more Catharan ships were destroyed. The cruiser Defiant took critical damage and began to break apart. But the ground teams were completing their missions. One by one, the demolition teams reported charges armed and active. All ground forces. Status report, Chen transmitted. Ground Team Alpha. Charges armed, extracting now. Ground Team Beta. Charges armed under heavy fire but extracting. One by one, the teams reported in. 11 successful placements. but Team Delta did not respond. Chen checked their location and saw their dropships had been destroyed. They were trapped on the surface with no extraction possible. Team Delta, this is Indomitable Actual. What is your status? Captain Rivera's voice came through, strained but steady. Admiral, charges are armed, but we lost our rides. No extraction possible. We will hold here as long as we can. Chen closed her eyes briefly. She had sent thousands of humans to die in this war. It never got easier. Understood, Captain. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. No sacrifice, Admiral, Rivera replied. She could hear weapons fire in the background. We knew what we signed up for. Just make sure this counts. Make sure we end them. The timer counted down. 9 minutes. 8. The Allied fleet began to pull back, fighting their way out of orbit. The swarm pursued, but they were confused now. Some ships moving to defend the planet while others chased the fleet.